Have you ever felt like Western medicine doesn't address the deeper reasons behind chronic illness? You probably have. And today's guest is a best selling author and certified professional coach who believes that unresolved traumas often hold the key to unlocking true healing. Her mind body spirit approach guides clients to clear these blocks and embrace a more empowered path to heal. Through her work, countless lives have been transformed from illness to vitality. This is the story of less fear, more flow with Teresa Bruni. Teresa, so glad to have you on.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you.
In reading your book, greatly titled Why You're Sick and How to Get Well, I couldn't help, but it was kind of a roadmap in some ways for people that are going through illness to follow. And of course, the best way to start with a roadmap is to experience it yourself, something that you had for quite a long time there. Can you start with that? What was your story that led you to writing this book?
It was in the late 80s. I was breaking out of an abusive marriage. So I was on this journey, this new journey to find a new career and a new place to live and all of that. And I was also divorcing toxic family members at the same time. I thought that was the best approach, just cut them out of your life. And then I started to get sick. I was very fit at the time. So I was lifting weights and doing yoga and swimming. So when I went to my doctor and said, I'm not feeling well, he did blood work. He did what the doctors typically do. He did blood work. He gave me a complete physical. My muscle strength was so strong that he was like, there's no way you can be sick, you're just
Right.
like the picture of health. There's no way you can be sick. And so he handed me a prescription and he sent me for stress management. And it wouldn't be for a few years until I discovered that that prescription was antidepressants
Hmm.
and the stress management was a psychologist.
Yeah.
Um, so there I was. I was sick with no diagnosis. I went from doctor to doctor. It took me 2 full years to get a diagnosis. And you probably read about that experience in the book. And so finally, I had a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia.
Hmm.
And I was referred to the University of Medicine and Dentistry in Newark, where they had a center for persons with chronic fatigue syndrome. This was a new illness at the time.
Yeah.
They had just named it. And so, like most people, I did what the doctors told me to do. I thought they had answers for me.
Hmm.
Fast forwarding 7 years, 7 years, I gave Western medicine 7 years of my life, and I wasn't getting well. In addition to that, I had an emotional breakdown. So at the time, I was taking a chemical cocktail, a pharmaceutical cocktail. I was taking pills to help me sleep, pills to give me energy during the day, pills to help with the pain, pills for this, pills for that. And the combination of all of those pills really threw off my mental balance. And it was someone who was very close to me. I had a meltdown. I had a literal meltdown. And this person said to me, you need to get off those drugs. They're changing your personality. And that was my big wake up call.
Yeah.
So I slowly weaned myself off the pills. I realized that these doctors were not going to get me well, or at least the chances were very slim because I'd already given them 7 years. And I
Hmm.
set out to do things my own way. And so I believe it takes a body, mind, spirit approach. You have to address all of it. Okay, we have to look at what the body is lacking nutritionally, strength wise, things like that. And we have to look at the spirit and the mind as well. So that's my roadmap. That's how it happened. Now, for me, because I didn't have anyone to guide me, my recovery took 3 more years.
Yeah.
But 3 years later, I returned to my corporate job full time, and I've been healthy, ever since. Uh, I get sick occasionally, but I bounce back fairly quickly
Yeah.
because I know how to take care of myself now. So,
Yeah. Well, in the healing process, I always say you transform if it's truly healing. It's not just symptom management or disease management, which is what conventional medicine does very well for chronic illnesses. But when you transform, you also evolve and become a much better reader of yourself, right? You probably know when something's a little off with you, or you might feel a little bit more sick. Whereas in most people, that kind of intuition, that understanding of themselves is a bit outsourced to the doctor, and
mhm,
they just listen to them and everything they say and put them on drugs, and they don't even really understand what they're feeling. They don't tap into the symptoms and the small signs that are showing that your body is telling you something may be off. So I truly believe that anybody that's healed, such as yourself, suddenly has this great appreciation and understanding of themselves. And that's a beautiful place to be. But again, when I look at this book and I go through those kind of initial chapters, especially, I see that this is something that I wish every patient would read as they start through their kind of going through and seeing others, because a big part of this that you bring up is fear. And it's logical that if you're going to get a diagnosis of something that's chronic and maybe incurable to conventional medicine, that fear kicks right in. But
exactly.
you made a really good point. I want you to talk about that, of how that fear is actually contributing to your illness, and you have to break free of the kind of fear model that we get thrown into. Can you talk about
Yeah,
that?
sure. So we have this innate response within us called the fight or flight response. And when we're in fear, the fight or flight response is turned on. And when that response is turned on, the body is releasing cortisol and adrenaline, which is actually damaging the body and turning off the immune system. So it's only when we can step out of fear into what I'm going to call the higher vibrational energies that we can turn off the fight or flight response and turn on our healing response.
Yeah.
And so it's key to step out of that fear. And I know firsthand how difficult that can be, especially someone who gets a diagnosis that medical science deems is terminal.
Hmm.
Um, how do you navigate that? It takes a lot of strength, and it takes belief in yourself, belief in a higher power, belief that you're going to be okay.
Yeah. And it's also part of what you wrote about. It's the nocebo effect, right? We all
Exactly.
understand the placebo effect. That's what's big in the news right now, whether or not, big pharma is even using a real placebo effect, or even bringing that up in their trials of trying out new medications. But there's the flip side to that that a lot of people forget, is that when you impact someone with a fearful thought, that will come true. And I think that's something I've seen so much. When someone gets a diagnosis that may or may not be correct, because as we know, diagnoses are kind of just words thrown around. If you're a specialist in one diagnosis, you're going to do that more often and diagnose people with it, even though
Yeah.
it may be something else. But that diagnosis alone, and let's say a 20% chance to recovery, suddenly instills that, and you start feeling worse and worse. I think you even
Yes.
gave a great story about your mother, unfortunately,
Yes.
succumbed to illness at the exact point that the doctor told her that it would be, right? And I've seen that many
Exactly.
times from family members and friends who tell me stories. And it kind of goes to show that, are we listening to doctors with too much trust in, and is that nocebo effect really that powerful?
It is. It is that powerful, and I
Yeah.
would like to share that story about my mother.
Please.
So my mother was diagnosed in November with pancreatic cancer,
Mm.
and her trusted physician told her she had 6 months.
Mhm.
Um, to my mother, the priest and the doctor were never wrong. Okay,
Mhm.
so um, and we tried herbal remedies. She wasn't too open to that, but she kind of did it to get us off her back. And then we took her to Sloan Kettering in New York City,
Mhm.
and the doctor there was younger and more progressive, and he was, it tears me up. He was
Mm,
actually on his knees in front of her saying, "We don't really know how long you have. You
mm,
might have 6 years, you know." And so he was trying to, so a seed had been planted and the tree grew, and he was trying to uproot that tree
mhm.
and pull it out. Consequently, that did not work. And 6 months later, my mother passed from her
Mm.
pancreatic cancer. And so I always wonder, what if her trusted physician okay, fine, you've got pancreatic cancer. We know that 90% of the time it's terminal. But what if he had said to her, "You could have 6 years, you could have 6 months, we just don't know." How would
Absolutely.
that have changed the picture? So, I've seen it firsthand, and I've experienced it with in my own journey with my doctors. They tell
Mm.
you, and this is something I love for people to grasp onto. When medical science tells you something is not curable, it's because they haven't found the cure yet. It's
Mm.
not that it's not curable, it's just that they haven't discovered the cure yet.
And isn't it also partly because maybe they don't want to discover the cure, and
Maybe
maybe because keeping you sick for the rest of your life is a wonderful business venture.
it
And
is.
I'm not saying that doctors are initiating this with the intention of it, but you know this, that when you go to doctors, they go off of what they believe is the evidence-based medicine that is the
Right.
golden standard with a double-blind placebo and published results and everything coming from the top institutes around the world that dictate what they believe, right? So
Exactly.
their belief system is there, their blinders and all are on. And even if they have good intentions, they're going to say it's incurable when even when presented with other cases that show it's been cured in other ways, they dismiss it, right?
Yeah, and I'd like to touch on that because following the pandemic, I see a lot of people posting on social media that they'll never trust a doctor again.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfortunate because there
Yes.
are a lot of really good doctors out there. What you need to realize is they've been indoctrinated.
Hmm.
I think there's a small percentage of doctors who get into it for the money. I think the rest of them really want to help people get well, but they go into this system where they're brainwashed.
Totally.
And so when you're in front of them, they're just regurgitating what they know. And let me tell you what, they don't know everything. That's why the book is titled "Everything Western Medicine Isn't Telling You."
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a lot they don't know.
And my father always said this because he's one that he said he himself went through the conventional route, pain medicine, anesthesiologist, surgery, all of it, right? And he was very conventionally based, went through the educational system of medical school, but he had to deprogram himself in order to open himself to travel the world and see what else was in there and learn traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, like European biological medicine. But he said it was difficult. And, he had to experience it. He was skeptical. But then, he said even the tougher part was trying to tell his colleagues and
Right.
others because they weren't open to it. They said, "You're
No, they're not.
crazy. You've lost your mind. What are you
Yeah.
doing?" Right. And even when he showed the results of what he's getting better results and they're actually healing, then some of the doctors said, "Well, that's not a good system because you're going to run out of patients if you keep healing them. You won't make money." Right.
Right.
And meanwhile, he did better and better. And of course, your reputation starts to become someone that truly heals and not just manages and everything else. But it's just funny because I believe since we're little, we're told that, doctors know what they're doing. They spend all this time and money learning so much. It's the gold standard they go through, governments back them up. There's multiple levels of trust in government, in science, in medicine as whole, and healthcare that we likely have to break down for that to happen. And books like yours start to do that. But how do you feel we start to get to those almost subconscious beliefs that people put their trust so much in that doctor that even when they say 6 months to live, almost to the date, it could be 6 months, even though maybe you were really given 6 years. How do you feel? Because you yourself had to do that over a number of years and experience, unfortunately, failure from the system to switch out. But do you think there's a catalyst here that doesn't mean everyone has to go through your experience?
Yeah. So, as a professional coach with excellent training, we are taught that when the pain outweighs the gain, you will make the shift.
Mm,
And so someone once asked me, what do you see as the main characteristic in the clients that work with you?
mhm.
And the two main characteristics were either fear of death or fear of becoming a burden on the family.
Wow.
So it has to be really painful in order for a person to say, I'll do anything to get well. And in my case, I desperately wanted my life back.
Wow.
I had a great corporate job. I lived in a nice place, and all of that fell apart when I became sick. So for me, I just had had enough. It was it was pretty obvious that they didn't have answers for me, and I
Mhm.
wanted my life back. So,
Right.
so it takes a huge catalyst. I see it saddens me every day on X where you and I met.
Yeah.
People, even this morning, a young girl was diagnosed with lung cancer.
Mm,
And 90% of the time, these people will go right back to conventional
yes.
medicine. And not all of the time, you can't just throw a blanket over everything, but a lot of the time, those doctors that you're turning to are the same ones that got you sick in the first place.
Absolutely.
So it's scary out there, and I don't really know how to get through to people other than to keep preaching, like
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
spreading the word that there are
Right.
other answers, other solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I could echo what you're saying because, we have this center that's been around for a while in New York, doing it in this holistic way, mind, body, spirit, and really helping people, heal and not just, again, put band-aids over their problems. And it's become sort of like known as last chance New York, they kind of jokingly call it,
Really?
because it's people who have that sudden fear of death and no other thing has worked. Then
Right.
they start to break down their concepts of what medicine is, that I've been failed. It's only then. And my father always said, like, I enjoy healing, but it's such a larger burden because you have to undo decades sometimes of
Yes.
damage, toxicity, emotional trauma. He's like, if we were the first option, it would be so much better. We could prevent disease, prevent suffering. Do you feel though, because you are on X, where there's obviously it's this platform that I find is the most open to kind of, this idea of holistic and the Maha movement, all these other things. Do you feel that we are moving in that direction at least? Because again, I feel like sometimes we're in silos and we just kind of listen to each other, but the majority still doesn't think the way we do. But are you seeing it yourself, even with your clients and everything, that there's more of an acceptance to turn to more of the alternative things and the emotional side and everything before the conventional? Or are we just, kind of just preaching to a small population?
I think we're preaching to a small population, and
Yeah.
here's why. I
Okay.
think you had even made a post in the last couple of days about um, taking care of your health before you
Yep.
lose it, and I was there. I know, you're just going to keep skipping down the road. Well, I've got my health. I'm not
Yeah.
in danger. So you've got that factor going on that people aren't going to pay attention until they're in crisis. And
Hmm.
then the other group of people are going to wait for the government to fix it.
Yes.
So they're going to wait for seed oils to be banned and dyes in our food to be banned. They're going to wait for the system to clean up the
Yeah.
food. I wouldn't wait for that. Personally, I would not wait for that. So I think that's what's going on. I think, and then you've got all of these self-proclaimed health gurus on the platform who are
Yep.
saying, supplements are poison. Well, I get the theory. I understand big pharma's behind the supplement industry as well.
Yep.
But if I need a supplement, I'm going to take it.
Yes.
Okay. I get where they're coming from. Supplements can be toxic, but if your body is deficient, and that's one of the things that I recommend when a client comes to me is to go in and get the conventional blood work and let's
Hmm.
see what's going on with your blood. Let's see what you're lacking. One thing that I was very lacking in when I was sick was magnesium. And
Yes.
magnesium is a very important element. Now, that's,
Huge.
some of these is important to distinguish a vitamin from a mineral.
Hmm.
So magnesium is a mineral. And so my doctor explained to me that once you become, because I said to him, how could I be deficient in magnesium? I take it every day. And he said, once you become deficient, your body loses its ability to absorb.
Yes.
So I had to get injections for
Hmm.
6 weeks to bring my levels back up. That's important information to know. So if you have, again, there are some experts on LinkedIn, there are some self-proclaimed health gurus who will tell you that you shouldn't be taking supplements. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. So, but I see people, there was one person that I interact with quite frequently who was sick. She had the flu this past winter, and I recommended vitamin C, high doses
Hmm.
of highly absorbable vitamin C to
Yep.
support your body. And I don't know, like 3 days later, I saw that she had posted that she was eating so much fruit that the citrus had actually burned her mouth.
Mm.
So she didn't want to take the supplements and she was trying to get it through food. God bless her, you know. Um, so it's still a big hill that we need to climb. It's still a very big hill that we need to
It
climb.
really is, and that's you bring up a few things in there. There's like even infighting among health and wellness, right? You
Yep,
see it all the time. It's like ban the vaccine. It's only how could you not be talking about the vaccine? Then it's well, what about food? No, it's this, and it's like why can't we look at this as a holistic thing and just say it's all there? As you wrote yourself, it's like there is no one size fits all here.
right.
Every individual is going to walk down their unique path, and we need to arm them with the research, but without the kind of conflicting and antagonizing and negative sort of stuff.
The
I'm actually
fear.
getting a little fed up with Twitter between all the health
Oh, me
people
too.
just attacking each other instead of
Yeah,
saying, listen, we kind of have a common enemy, which is big pharma and government trying, everyone trying to keep us unhealthy. But if you have the opposite intention, allow people to give their opinions, but it shouldn't be a lot of this infighting. And I guess that comes to because a large part of what you wrote here very wisely is you got to be your own researcher. You got to be your own advocate. You cannot allow just doctors to dictate what is the best for your body with their sometimes limited knowledge base on you and maybe on different, aspects of you. So how do we cut through the bullshit? How do we cut through one guy saying eat tons of meat, another person saying become a vegan, one person saying fast for a week or a month at a
right,
time?
right, right.
How do we start to cut through that? Because I myself am like, oh my goodness, there's just too much info. I give up. I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you have to take it all in, and it's absolutely essential that you do your own research so that
Yep.
you're making an informed decision. And that's going to go a long way because we talked a moment ago about the nocebo effect. We really
Hmm.
didn't touch on the placebo effect, but I think people know what that is.
Yep.
So here's the key. If you think it's good for you, there's a good chance it is. Okay,
Bingo.
because it's the
Yeah.
mindset piece, which we haven't really talked about yet, but it's the mindset piece, and that's why you'll never see me post things like, "Well, if you took the vaccine, this is going to happen to you." I truly believe mindset is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to plant those seeds like the doctor did to my mother. I'm
Hmm.
not going to plant those seeds in anybody's head. You will never see me do that on social media
Yeah. And
because I
that's
know
smart.
how powerful it is.
I think the best thing we could try and do here is just put the information out and then teach people to be more intuitive, to do their own internal sort of muscle testing and kinesiology. What
Yes.
vibes with you, right? You know this about people. You just vibe with them, you want to be around them. That vibe is correlation. That's good for
Yeah.
you. You want to. And then those toxic people that just drain you, right?
Yep.
That you're around, you're like, oh, I feel so terrible afterwards. You don't want to be around that. I think we need to do the same for information, right? And take it in as not good, bad, or anything, as neutral, because it's just information. And then allow our bodies to pick up on, am I really, compatible with this? Is it vibing with me or not? And I feel like that's the best way because otherwise you will be overwhelmed. And
Yes. And
yeah,
I understand that people have very busy lives. You know, they have their jobs and their children and school activities, and people are probably saying, well, how am I supposed to spend time researching? I'm so busy, I practically fall asleep standing up at night. But it's really important. You know, most people do more research when purchasing a new car than they do when choosing a doctor.
yeah,
And your health is your most important asset. So you have to. There's no excuse, there's no way around it. You have to. You have to do your own research. You know, you can find three or four articles in the same day that one is pro on this and the other one is negative on this. And so it's important for each individual to do that research and then make the decision that they feel is best for them. That'll go a long way. You
yeah.
know, just believing that you're making the right decision will go a very long way.
Oh, absolutely. And the people that end up usually at our center will come in with binders of research,
Oh,
right?
really?
And think, oh yeah, sometimes it's like overwhelming for the practitioner to be like, oh my God, you just handed me a 500-page book of your life. I don't have time. But of course, taking it in, but they are very, very aware. They end up with us because they've done enough research, because they've cut through the BS and kind of, had to navigate other areas and find themselves there. And a big part of that, of course, is their mentality as they went through it. And one of the aspects of mentality is kind of to focus on the positive, the cure, not the disease. You wrote one thing, and I want you to explain it that I completely agree with. And I was like, yes, I heard it. It's I oppose the ever-present pink ribbon symbolic of breast cancer awareness. Now, it sounds pretty callous to be like, what, you don't like the pink ribbon? It's like a Seinfeld episode. You're not wearing the ribbon? Why aren't you wearing the ribbon, right? But can you talk about why? Because there's a logical reason here. Why do you oppose that?
Sure. And I think that's the first chapter in the book. Well,
It's
it's the
like page
second.
10
Yeah.
I'm looking at. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah.
So there's this universal law called the law of attraction.
Yep.
And some people get it, some people have no clue. But basically, the law states that whatever you focus on is going to become part of your reality. So the whole ribbon symbol started with the yellow ribbon on the old oak tree. People
Mm.
probably know the song, and that was about bringing home our loved ones. Okay, and so I use the example of breast cancer in the book because it's so prevalent in our society, and so we have this we wage this war against breast cancer, which is also an incorrect theory that I talk about in that chapter. Um, so if you're going to, and I make the claim in the book that the reason breast cancer is so prolific in our society is it's because of our never-ending focus upon it. So law of attraction brings more of it to us. And I use the quote from Mother Teresa that says, "I will never protest against war. When you march for peace, let me know," because
Love
she
that.
knew you want your focus on the outcome. And so I surf the web and I see um, cancer treatment centers. Well, no, don't focus on the cancer, focus on the cure.
Sure.
So all the pink ribbons, they're just every time you see a pink ribbon, what do you think about?
Yeah.
You think
Cancer.
about breast
Yes.
cancer, and what you think about manifests.
Absolutely.
So
That's
so
the
I'm not a ribbon.
affirmations you write, right? And the
Yeah,
visuals, what you put in your head. Like you say, your subconscious won't even tell the difference of the negative. They're just picking up on the word cancer, right?
right,
And almost allowing that to persist in you and grow.
right, right. And so I mention Race for the Cure, Susan G. Coleman's Race for the
Hmm.
Cure. They don't even use the words breast cancer. They
Yeah.
are racing for the cure. See, that's a huge difference when you're talking about the law of attraction. And it's really an important component in the healing process. As a matter of fact, I was thinking today I was watching some of your other podcasts to prepare, and I had to take myself back because it's been a long time now, and trying to remember, okay, how did all of these pieces fall into place? And I clearly remembered one day, I was in the bathroom just brushing my teeth. It was a normal day, another day of being ill, brushing my teeth, and I looked in the mirror and I realized I didn't recognize the
Mm.
person who was looking back. And I also so that led to mirror work, which I'm more than happy to talk about. But
Yeah.
I also realized at that point that I didn't remember what it felt like to be well.
Hmm.
I had been sick for so many years, I didn't remember what it felt like to wake up feeling good, feeling refreshed, feeling strong,
Mm.
feeling happy and healthy. So,
That becomes a new norm, right? Because it's a
yeah,
slow progression. Usually disease isn't this sudden, like acute, yes, you wake up one day. Chronically, it takes time. It's a
it
little
does.
pain, maybe it goes away, maybe it comes back, it lingers, it slowly builds up. It
It
turns
does.
into this, it turns into fatigue, it turns into, chronic skin issues or gut issues. And then one day you wake up with this list of symptoms, and you realize you've been the frog in the slowly boiling water, and now
Right.
it's truly boiling, but that's your new temperature you're used to. And
Right.
so you forgot what it's like in the lukewarm regular water, right? And
Right.
then you have doctors telling you it's just aging, it's genetics, it's
Right.
whatever, right? We got a pill for that. Don't worry, right? And that's the worst part. Instead of saying that's not normal, we say,
Right.
it's part of just, aging, not a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. So the naturopathic or the functional medicine doctors have a theory called the bucket theory, which I
Yes.
also talk about in the book. So the
Yeah.
bucket theory um, is about that we all have a bucket, and we're born with a certain size bucket, and all of the toxins and our emotional issues and all of the things that we do that are not good for us go into that bucket. And then when that you can hold on to a lot. Most people can hold on to quite a bit. But then when that bucket starts to overflow,
Mhm.
that's it. You can't have any more. So that's what happened to me. I had experienced an extremely abusive childhood,
Mm.
ended up in an abusive marriage, no surprise, not surprisingly. And then so going through that divorce was like it overfilled my bucket,
Mhm.
and my body could not take any more stress. And so I became chronically ill. And so it took time. That morning I looked in the mirror brushing my teeth and I didn't recognize myself. I hopped up on the bathroom counter and I looked myself deep into my own eyes, and I told myself that I love you. And
Mm.
like all these tears came, and it was so hard to say. And so I knew right then, okay, we've stumbled on something here. Lack of self-esteem, lack of feeling worthy of love and acceptance. And so I knew that there was a lot of work to do. Um, and so that was also a big part of my journey. After I
Yeah.
got off the meds and then started to look within, um, and so I started doing mirror work. That's what that is called. And I've had clients that flat out refuse to do it because it just scares them. Okay.
Right. How many people
So
actually look in the mirror and actually look and stare and think and talk to themselves, right?
talk to
It's just
yourself.
weird,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
And
So So I
Yeah.
made it a habit, I made it part of my daily routine to do that exercise. And then 10 years later, I'm well, living a happy life. And I read about it in a book that was written 25 years ago. So, so mirror work's been around for a long, long time.
Right.
And so what that made me realize, because I said to myself, how could I have possibly have discovered this? If I hadn't read about it or anything, how could it come so naturally to me? And that's when I realized that we know what we need to do to get well.
Yeah.
We just have to be open to it.
That's right. And it's important to note that even within the bucket theory, it's a lot of people like to assign it to, toxins that we're used to, chemicals, PFAS, forever mercury and heavy metals, but it is the emotional toxins as well. It's stressors in life. It's even unseen EMF, other things that can drop into that bucket and overflow it. So as much as people like to say, well, I work out every day and sweat and move and yoga and this and that, if they're not addressing that emotional side, which the mirror work does so well, then they're still putting lots of drops in it and can overflow and start to have symptoms and then disease. And that's why, as much as there are all those influence out there that are doing great stuff and get your steps and eat well, sleep well, if they miss on the body and the mind and the emotions and the trauma, they're missing a huge portion of what it means to be human and what may lead you to disease.
Exactly.
So talk about, more about the mental aspects, the emotions, and as well how the mirror kind of practice of looking at yourself starts to release that and is a therapeutic kind of way of going about it.
Yeah, because I cannot tell you what a huge emotional release it was. And it is difficult work, but it's well worth doing. We talked about fear in the
Yes.
beginning of our conversation. And one of the hardest things for me um, to get people to understand is, yeah, it's going to be painful, but once you get past that, the pain is gone for like forever. So,
Right.
um, so the and just backing up to what you said a minute ago, when I was sick and out on disability, I was at a barbecue, and one of the girls said to me, "How do I make sure I don't get sick like you?" And I said, take good physical care of yourself. That was my answer. And I
Hmm.
told you how physically strong I was, right? And she said,
Yeah.
but look at you, you still
Right.
got sick. Okay.
Good point.
So, so it
Yeah.
takes much more than just keeping your body physically strong. It's nutrition and it's the emotional work. It comes down to the emotional work. Unfortunately, in our world, we come into this world being told that we're flawed.
Hmm.
Okay, you have sin on you were born a sinner. All right, so that's the first thing they tell you, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you can start to listen, they tell you, well, you were flawed when you got here. So there's a lot to clean up, and once I changed careers and I pursued this career to help people get well, my clients helped teach me a lot. And I was working with a client who had had a physical trauma. And I said, well, I need to learn all that I can about trauma. So I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der
Great.
Kolk. He's the leading trauma expert in like the world.
Hmm.
And when you read that book, you instantly realize that trauma, domestic trauma, outnumbers military trauma
Hmm.
by a lot. And so you might be sitting there going, well, I had a rough childhood, but I wouldn't necessarily consider myself traumatized. Well, let me tell you what, when your father beat you with that belt to the
Hmm.
point of leaving marks on your body, that was trauma. There's no getting around that. But we grow up and we just say, well, that was a normal part of everybody was beat, right?
Right.
Everybody was beat, or that teacher telling you that you're stupid. Okay, and on and on. I could go on and on. So a lot of people are walking around traumatized and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
Okay, but eventually, it has the potential to catch up with you and affect your health. Because once again, when you're traumatized, Vander Kolk describes it as unresolved trauma keeps you locked in to a state of fight or flight.
Hmm.
And as we discussed earlier, that means your body is producing adrenaline and cortisol. It's damaging your body and it's turning off your immune system. So it's really important to address those traumas. In addition to that, self-esteem, having healthy boundaries,
Hmm.
and for anybody who's been traumatized, there's a good possibility you've got poor boundaries, you've got
Yeah.
boundary issues. And that's an ongoing process. We all have to work on our boundaries every single day
Yes.
and make them better and better. Um, so again, when a client comes to me, we break down everything. We look at everything and we try to heal each individual thing as we go along.
Yeah, and I noticed in the book you bring up traumas that many people probably wouldn't associate with or even understand, like generational trauma, right?
Generational
Or
trauma.
tra or the childhood trauma that you just don't remember, right? You were
Yeah.
too young for your conscious mind to remember, but it's stored. And maybe it created a belief system, you're not good enough, you're not this, anything that is now leading you. Because I see so many patients out there doing what seems like everything right. They're taking care of the body. They're going to mindfulness things. They're eating right. They're working with good practitioners. But somehow something is still missing, right? And I truly believe there is a belief system and some trauma that they can't even remember or pick up on. Because generational, and maybe you could talk about that a little bit, it's not something that you did even, right? It wasn't even
Right.
from you in a sense. It just passed along. Because I sometimes, look at this. My parents came from Poland. Their parents were from World War II. They were in concentration camps. They were absolutely living in fear and just terrible times back then in World War II. And you wonder, how does that impact a whole generation of Poles at the time, of people of that time? We're only two generations from that. Is that carried on? And do we need to deal with that and address that? But go into generational trauma a little bit and kind of,
Yeah, so what we know, medical science for years has told us that the our illnesses come down in our genes, such as breast cancer. I'll use the breast cancer
Mhm.
example again. So maybe your grandmother had it, and your aunt had it, and your mother had it. So you're pretty sure you're going to have it. What we know now through epigenetics is it's not in the gene. It's in the emotions that are attached to those genes that trigger the response. So there's generational trauma coming down the line. It's the trauma that's getting passed down that's turning the expression of the gene on to produce the illness.
Mhm.
And we have numerous examples. World War II is an excellent example. Um, um, the Japanese that were in internment camps
Right.
here in the United States, that was a horrible
Yeah.
experience. And so that gets seeded in the body and that gets passed down from generation to
Mhm.
generation. I'll give you a good example of so that's a broad example of generational trauma. And we see it with the indigenous American culture.
Right.
They were so traumatized that they have a propensity for alcoholism,
That's right.
which is just self-medicating. We all know that.
Of course.
But here's a perfect example. So I worked with a client years ago, and um, she said, I was born with deformed hips. And it wasn't anything that really affected her life. She was a yoga instructor, but still her hips were turned slightly forward. And I said, knowing what I know, I said, do you know what your mother was going through when she was pregnant with you? And she said, yes, she was preparing to leave my alcoholic abusive father. So the hips represent our ability to move forward.
Mm.
So let's look at the big picture. Here's this woman, probably back in the 60s or 70s, pregnant in an abusive marriage. ready to step out, and she probably had a ton of fear of the future. And consequently, all those emotions are feeding right into the fetus. Okay. And so then, people wonder why babies are born sick. Well, there's one example. I mean, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. So that's a perfect example of generational trauma on a much simpler scale, you know.
Yeah. Let's talk about the solutions then, because obviously, we have all of these, issues that we have to, deal with. And a lot of them go beyond the body into the mental side, into the psychological, the emotional states of people that a lot of people lack the tools to address them,
Mhm.
and seek it. And you brought up a lot of different tools. There's ETF and all sorts of ones there. One that really stuck out to me that I was familiar with most of the ones was the Psych one. All right.
Yeah.
And I'd
Yeah.
love for you to get into that, and because that's something you utilize and are a facilitator of with your clients. So can you
I
talk
do.
about Psych K?
Yeah, so I like to call Psyche one of the world's best kept secrets.
Mm,
Unfortunately, the originator of Psyche decided not to heavily advertise like a lot of other practitioners do. His feeling was if you were called to do it, the message would get to you.
yes.
And um, he was a trained psychologist and just struggling one day and prayed out to God. And this whole protocol came down to him that is now called Psyche. Uh, what we do with Psyche is first we use muscle testing or applied kinesiology, which has
Hmm.
been around for what, 50 years, developed
It
by a
has. Yeah.
chiropractor 50 years ago. Medical
Good
science
heart.
says
Yeah.
it's nonsense. Okay. It's a way to communicate with the body because your body has all the answers. You cannot keep any secrets from your body. It's all in there. So
Especially from your nervous system, right? Like that's the
exactly,
truth teller of
exactly.
the body.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we use muscle testing to find out the truth and then reverse it. And the way that we reverse that, we can literally reprogram the subconscious mind.
Mm,
And the beautiful thing about it is, like you were talking about earlier, you may have been traumatized as a child and you don't even remember.
right.
We don't need to know that. It's not going to take years of therapy. You don't have to go to a hypnotist to find out, if you had some sort of horrible trauma as a child. All we need to know is I don't have any self-esteem.
Hmm.
I feel unlovable. I have this chronic illness. I am always broke. Whatever the issue is, that's all we really need to know, and then we can work on it. And we do that by taking, how you are, reversing that. So I'm unlovable to I am worthy of unconditional love from myself and others. And then we do what's called a balance, and that's an affirmation. Okay. So you can say that affirmation every day 100 times for a couple of years, or we can use Psyche and instantly program it into the subconscious mind and for effective change. That's a broad overview of
Sure.
Psyche. And I didn't just I was probably back to work. Like I said, I was actually in my healing practice. So when I went back to work, I went back to corporate as uh, I was a computer tech. I was a
Hmm.
geek. I spent the beginning of my career. I'm a geek turned healer, just so just so everybody knows.
That's quite the juxtaposition there.
It was.
Yeah.
And so I was probably in my healing practice, which I started in 2012 for 5 years before I discovered Psyche.
Mm,
And so here was this power tool, and suddenly I had
hmm.
this power tool. So sometimes people come to me just for Psyche. But out of all of the tools that I have, and I have a lot of tools, I would say Psyche is probably my most powerful tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing, because so many people are searching for some kind of magic pill, or they come to our center and what's the IV that's going to transform everything and get me
Right.
better? My
Right.
father, after all these years and other doctors that work there, and I've spoken to her, like it's usually the subtle ones that reprogram the patient itself and the information, the
The
bad
information.
information they're working on, right? The beliefs and the systems within them that keep them there that are the most profound. No IV
Yeah.
is going to do it, no nothing. And sometimes it seems simple, right? It seems that just saying something or holding an intention or anything like that, how is that therapy of, you could now put lasers in your veins and do all sorts of things. But those are the most profound, and those are the ones that people need to be able to embrace more.
Yeah.
I mean, have
Yeah,
you
and
have you seen?
I took a good look at your center, and I loved a lot of the therapies that you do there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
You know,
Well, my
like
mother was a psychologist, right? And she worked with my father. My father was always someone that when he went to all these gurus and masters around the world, they always brought up the spiritual and psychological part as being more important than the
it
body.
is.
You know,
It
and
is.
and so he had to again reprogram his thought of only treat the body and the symptom to what is the underlying cause. And the underlying cause sometimes will never show up on a biochemical test because it isn't biochemistry. It's something much deeper and more profound for the human body. And that is the spiritual, the consciousness, the energy of it. And so once he started to figure that out, he's like, what am I doing with all this body stuff?
I
It's
love
it's
it.
nice and it's helpful, right? But if you
Yeah.
don't combine it with the other things, you're missing the
Yeah.
biggest portion of healing.
Yeah. Like I tell people, if I break my leg, take me to the nearest hospital,
Absolutely, right?
please.
Yeah, no, and that's why it's never to knock that system. I never wanted to. My father started there. He got his whole career starting in that system, and it's beautiful for what it is, for
Yeah.
emergency medicine,
Yeah.
acute things, right? But we have to acknowledge that it's not working so well for the chronic illness, for mental disorders and everything, the things that are more prevalent, as you say, it's 6 out of 10 now, right? Are dealing with at least one chronic illness. And
Right.
they're likely to never get better with the approach they're going at through conventional medicine and only slowly get worse.
Right. And the other thing that medical science, Western medicine does really well is diagnosing.
Yes.
So that's why when someone comes to me, I recommend that they go get some blood work,
Hmm.
to see what they're deficient in or to see what's going on. And then when we have that diagnosis, we can work with that. But yeah, one thing that stood out for me on your website was ozone.
Yeah.
Because ozone is very powerful. So again, it's not just the emotional work, it's a well-rounded approach that the body needs. And so when I got here to Mexico, ozone is readily available.
That's
And
the beauty about Mexico, right? It's
yeah,
much more open and not as attacked, let's say.
yeah. So I went right in. I always wanted ozone. I always wanted to try ozone. And so I went right in for some ozone just as preventative.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
and
it's wonderful, right?
yeah, it's great. It's great. It kills
This natural
parasites.
compound that was so big in the 50s and 60s. I had Luciano Bodo who's making a whole movie, a documentary about ozone and, the Lost Miracle '03, right? Of how it had such great results for any kind of infectious disease, boosting immune,
Yes,
and then of course pharma kind of got involved and shut it down in many ways and said we don't need that. It's not actual real medicine and that's the story of so many things. And these are natural. Ozone's natural. It's what happens when lightning hits and that smell after a
right,
lightning storm, right? And so
right.
it's this amazing, element. Same with UV light in the right, in the right setting. UVBI, which is ultraviolet blood irradiation, like ozone, is this wonderful purifier, right? We know this when we're out in the sun. It's sort of a purifying effect as well in most cases. And so we've lost the art of understanding how it is nature is our greatest healer. And I know you're big about, turning nature and you said you love getting your feet in the ground and grounding and being out. How do you cultivate that again in patient or your clients that have those incredibly long days and are always, running around and everything? How do you get them to stop and pause and actually embrace nature as being part of the healing process?
Well, that's something that you have to make a conscious choice, just like you do eating a meal. So,
Yes.
So try to work it in somehow. If you have kids or grandkids, take your shoes off and go play in the yard with them. Um, you know, nature is right there. So grounding, all you have to do is touch a tree, or even all you really have to do is touch the leaf on
Right.
that tree, and you will begin to ground. Um, so it takes me back to the tree hugger era.
Yeah.
They were probably getting a lot more out of hugging that tree than they ever even realized. It's all self-care. They're all
Yeah.
self-care things that you have to find a way to fit it in. Now, and I also recently learned that you can ground even on concrete, because
Hmm.
concrete is made up of sand
That's true.
and lime. I think it's lime.
Mm.
Um, so the healing energy of the earth can penetrate concrete, but it can't penetrate synthetics. So
Right.
you've got to take your synthetic shoes off,
Right.
and you can't be on the pavement.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of ways to ground there that are a lot simpler than people realize.
Yeah. And again, we got
Yeah,
to realize that, there isn't a disconnection. Like, I know everyone says get out in nature, but just the realization you are a part of nature, right?
you
You may
are.
be separating yourself in some sort of a, office block or something like that, but we're always part of nature. We are animalistic at our nature, and there's no separation really. That itself is an illusion, a separation from universe, from nature. We are
Exactly.
all that, right? And
Exactly.
that's very comforting and healing to know.
We were put on this earth to live on this earth in harmony,
Yes.
and there are some people who believe, and I believe this myself, there are some people who believe that God put a cure for everything on this planet.
Yeah. I mean, even EMF and 5G, the fact that shungite, this mysterious rock that was found in Russia that many people think coming from a comet or something, it can actually help with that, can absorb EMF in its C60 fullerene structure. I mean, that to me is astounding. It's like nature is so smart. It saw
It
things
is.
before and basically provided all the answers. And the
Yeah,
fact that
and
we turn to pharmaceuticals that 70 to 80% are derived from nature, and
exactly,
valerian root is there. It's now part of
exactly,
Ambi and other things, right? But why not go to the natural source first?
exactly. And I just read an article the other day that um, they've discovered a fungus that eats plastic.
See? It's we cause the problem and nature says, I got that. I got
Yeah,
that.
I'm going to fix that for you.
Right?
And you can see that just by looking at Chernobyl and what happened
That's
there.
right. Yeah.
Nature fixed it.
Incredible what happened there, right? And it's
Yeah,
thriving again, and it's
yeah,
this, they're trying to study it now. How did this happen? They never thought it would, but
yeah.
nature has the solution. And it is so smart, and that's where we want to tap into that intelligence that we're connected with, and go more that way. Teresa, as we wrap up, I wanted to, for you to be able to share what would be the process of working with yourself, and kind of what can people expect if they were to work with you.
Well, I invite people to visit my website, and it is my name, teresabruni.com. There you can request a discovery session, and we just talk. I might not be able to help you, and if that's the case, I'm going to be honest and tell you that. But I'll also tell you what we could accomplish together. Whether it's just improving your life, having more self-worth, having a better career, having the courage to build a better career, better relationships. Or, my favorite clients are the ones who are chronically ill, because I love seeing them make that transition.
Yeah.
That's what I live for.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really easy. Just go to my website and request a discovery session. It's 45 minutes, and there's no cost, and all we do is talk. After I finish the book, I decided that I wanted to write a workbook to go with
Hmm.
it. So you see that mentioned all throughout the book that there's a workbook. The workbook is designed for people who might not be able to afford to work with me or just have a strong desire to work on their own. Maybe
Hmm.
they're not quite convinced that I have the answers for them. So,
Hmm.
and that's okay too. So the workbook, I think I have it priced at $150, but it's well worth it because it'll take you probably a year to get through the workbook. And it's designed, initially you go through and you rate where you are now, and that helps you figure out what you need to work on first. And then you can chapter hop.
Hmm.
If you feel nutrition is your biggest hurdle, then you can start with that chapter. If you want to work with visualizations, which we really didn't get a chance to talk about, but I ask all of my clients to visualize because
So
it's such a
important.
powerful tool.
Absolutely.
So the workbook is designed for you to chapter hop. You can go
Mm.
through it at your own pace in any order.
And thing at once. And, that's why I try and tell people, even though, you may have a lot of things going on to address, just one step at a time, right? One
Exactly.
thing at a time, improve. Don't get overwhelmed and just throw up your hands and say, I'm done. I can't do this. You can. It's just one thing. And that's the beauty
Exactly.
of chapter hopping is one chapter at a time, right?
Exactly. What I recommend is that you take a couple of chapters and work on them simultaneously because you
Mm.
can work on your diet and you can visualize at the same
Oh, yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend that. But setbacks. I had a client earlier this week who came to session and said, "Well, I had a little bit of a setback." She was researching some other things, so she fell behind on her daily practices. That happens, so we don't beat up on ourselves. We just get back on the horse and keep going. I clearly remember being so excited because maybe I had 5 good days and then I'd
Hmm.
have like 3 really horrible days.
Yep.
But what was important to remember is I was still ahead by two.
That's right.
Okay.
Two
I was
steps
still
forward,
ahead.
one step back. You're still a step ahead.
That's what healing looks like.
Yeah.
That's what healing looks like. It's a few steps forward, one step back, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this, for sharing your story. And I highly recommend anyone going through any kind of, condition or looking to, improve on their health is read the book, Why You're Sick and How to Get Well, because I really found it a profound kind of roadmap to get started, and really
Thank
help.
you.
So thank you for writing it and thank you for your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to help get the word out because there is hope. I don't ever believe that there's not hope. There's always hope.
That's a beautiful message. And be sure to check out Teresa on Twitter. That's where I found you. Love her post there, or X as they call it now, with the real Teresa Bruni. That's TeresaBruni. And at YouTube at Teresa Bruni the Healer. And until next time, continue writing your own healing story.